In my story, I got feedback that I was sitting in the back of the room. I wasn't participating in meetings. I wasn't adding value. And moments before I get that feedback, I'm a top talent. I'm doing all the right things. So I had no idea that I had become complacent and I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do to get not necessarily recognition, but to just have my voice out there. And what was really hard for me to, just sit with for a minute after I heard that feedback is I'm not only hiding myself, but I'm hiding my team. I'm hiding our work. I'm hiding all the good things. And I just, I was so focused on trying to stay out of the spotlight that it was hurting so much, and we all know in companies whose teams are hidden away and no one knows what you do, well, that's the first group to go. So you never want to not be talking about the value that you're providing. And to me, that is how you get recognition, how you get opportunities, how you get promotions, but also how you get included in things that maybe you never even thought you could be before. And hiding feels safer because it is, but it also keeps you from opportunities.
Welcome back to the Impodsters, the podcast where we explore the hidden side of success, self-doubt, and the stories behind imposter syndrome. Today's guest is Susan M. Barber. Susan is a former Fortune 500 IT director with over 25 years of leadership experience at Kraft Heinz, where she led global teams in sales, supply chain, food service, and IT. She's now a professional certified executive coach who helps high-achieving professionals overcome imposter syndrome and build authentic visibility, I love that term, to advance their careers. She is the author of The Visibility Factor, and that is a guide that offers actionable strategies for leaders to show their value, amplify their voice, and step confidently into greater influence without compromising their authenticity. If you love what we're doing, follow us on social media and subscribe to the Impodsters, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So I'm Johnny, and I have our definition of the day. And today's definition is seen from the lens of Susan Barber's work. Susan categorized imposter syndrome into 6 distinct types. The agreeable accommodator, or the people pleaser, sometimes I think I'm that. The just can't say no or boundary avoider, might be that a little too. The image judger or comparer, the diminished and devalued, the one who plays small. The delayer and avoider, or the procrastinator, that might be my wife. And the criticism avoider, the perfectionist. Each type reflects a coping mechanism used to manage fear and maintain a sense of safety, often at the cost of visibility and impact. This is a truly fascinating framework for understanding the nuances of imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so much fun to be here. And I love that you see yourself in some of these imposter syndrome types. I definitely have experienced all of them along the way.
Yeah, after kind of reading through them, I'm like, I'd say on a spectrum, every single one, I'm checking that box at some point in my life. We talk a little bit about on the show that at least my personal view is the imposter syndrome never goes away entirely. We don't, conquer it or slay it or kill it or drown it. It's always there with us. It's a fundamental part of who we are. But I will say, looking through your framework, I think there is a higher level of success for me, both accomplished success and potential success in at least making one of these distinct types go away. So I think I have conquered the just say no. I've learned how to draw boundaries and have no problem with that now. So while I don't think killing the imposter is an option, maybe some of the components of it we can lesser. So I'm excited to learn more about your framework. Can you tell us just a little bit more about what we touched on, your upcoming book, and some of the how that framework came to you?
Well, it's interesting. As I was writing the first book, it was really apparent to me as I was putting together the framework. There's a framework in the book called Rise, which I think we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But in that framework, it kind of walks you through how to create a visibility plan. And when I was working with my developmental editor, we were talking about it, and she said, "What's the thing that stops you from being able to really be visible?" And I said, "Well, of course, imposter syndrome to me is the number one thing, around fear and the things that I was telling myself stories about the whole time. And that was keeping me small, and that was keeping me hidden from the things that I really wanted to be able to do." And so she said, "What if we put that chapter right in the middle of your framework to help people understand that they can start this, but if they don't understand where imposter syndrome might come in and impact them, they won't be able to continue and be successful." And I thought that was so brilliant. I would have probably never thought of that. And I am so appreciative that she thought of it, because that is the chapter that I think a lot of people ask me about. Like, how do I do this? And so when I wrote that chapter, I purposely used a client's experience walking through it, because I wanted people to see you're not alone, right? Everybody has it, as we just talked about. Everybody has this at one time or another. I think it's 70% of people are walking around with imposter syndrome every day. And so if we all have it, could we just experience it and know that it's going to happen? And what can we do in terms of strategies or understanding why it's happening for us? It's just our brain trying to keep us safe and trying to keep us in a good place. And move through it, right? To your point, like, how do we just keep taking some actions that help kind of push it back into, where it needs to be for a while we do new things and try things. But I just see it as a way to learn and grow now. I don't really see it as a negative like I probably used to. I really see it as something that we can embrace, that it's trying to help us and help us grow and help us learn. And, that's, if I think about situations that happened to me, those are the things that I learned the most from, was challenges and mistakes I made and maybe perceived failures by me, but not by anybody else necessarily. And that's how you grow.
Mm. You hit on a topic that has been discussed on our show several times. Dr. Terry Simpkin, actually one of her taglines is, "It's not a bloody syndrome." I love that. Jill Stoddard, Dr. Jill Stoddard, we had her on and talked a little bit. And there were a lot of things that I think they brought to the table that were centered around the debate of everyone having it or everyone experiencing it. And I think early on in my journey in creating the podcast and some of the study that I was doing and research that I was doing, I felt myself leaning too hard into this fight of, I don't think that's a good statement, that I don't believe everybody experiences. I do think everyone experiences self-doubt, and there's the situational where when you're thrust into a situation. But I've actually seen a lot of people that they get into a situation where they are out over their skis, they do not know what they're doing, and they call that imposter syndrome. No, that's not what imposter syndrome is. But what I also realized is the nuances, like we talked about in the recurring need for the definition of the day. There's so many facets and angles. I just sort of realized I don't want to spend too much of my time debating that piece of it. It's, I know where I'm going to gravitate toward, and it's really toward the fundamental lack of capability in enjoying your successes as though they're earned. Backwards looking, you've already done the thing and you can't experience it in a way where, where it feels pure.
Yeah.
So I always like to touch on that piece when someone comes in, maybe challenge it and poke it a little bit. But I also do see that a lot of the tools that we leverage for full, kind of farther into the spectrum, imposter syndrome sufferers, it's a lot of the tools are applicable for everyone. It's a little bit universally accepted that when you're in the mode of maybe a pathological level of self-doubt, that these are tools that can work you out of it. imposter or not. So there's no question behind that. I just always love to make that statement and touch on that piece of it. But there was also something you covered. You mentioned the RISE framework. Let's talk about that. I want to understand that. What is your framework offers a structured path to visibility, as I understand it. And
Mhm.
so if you would, can you walk us through how someone might apply RISE and tell us a little bit more about RISE and just fill us in on this exciting acronym of yours?
Yes, I love a good acronym. And I think of it as a bit of a metaphor too, because rising up and standing out against other people. So it works from that perspective as well. But when originally was putting this together, I thought, how do I work with people? And what do I do to help them move past some of these challenges that they're experiencing? And as I was as I was sitting with my editor and talking to her about things, she's brilliant. And so I said, here's the things I do. And she literally helped me write down RISE. And I thought, oh my gosh. So let me just tell you what it stands for. So the first one, R, is for reflect. So reflecting on what it is you want in your career, where you are, why do you need visibility to help you get there? And a lot of people, I think, just don't think about visibility as something that they even need. They don't understand it or hadn't learned about it yet. And I think when you're an individual contributor up to a certain point, you probably are so focused on performance and proving yourself that it isn't as important. But as you climb the ladder, it becomes so much more important. And so I want to help people understand that. The second letter is I for ideate, which is coming up with ideas, your own ideas, looking at what other people are doing and how can you modify that to work for your style. I have hundreds and hundreds of ideas in the book. It's crazy how many I was able to come up with based on my experience and clients. And they're all categorized by strengths, people's strengths. That might be writing, it might be volunteering, it might be being in management. So I tried to lay them out so that no matter where you are in your career, whether you're just getting started or you're more advanced, you'd be able to find some things that you could start to leverage as actions. And then the next letter is S, which is select. But I don't want people to select a million ideas. Just because they exist doesn't mean you should select them all. So let's start with three and just really hone in on those three and try them because not everything is going to work for every person. And I want them to try them out and see how they feel. And when they start to do that, it's also important to measure. How are you going to measure success or not? And some of that is your own experience of that, and some of it is other people's feedback. So, really laying out what you're going to do and how you're going to measure success. And then the last letter is E for evaluate. And that's evaluating feedback you get, evaluating how you feel, and saying, is this the right set of three, for example, that I want to continue to do more of, or do I need additional ones? And that evaluation step is so important. And I think a lot of times we skip it because, oh, I'm trying stuff. I think it's working. I don't know. Or we skip the feedback part and we don't want to ask the question that says, yeah, you're showing up differently. But what I found from anyone who's doing it in my own experience is that you start to feel different first. You're trying things. Nobody knows you're trying these things. You're just starting to do something different, like sit at the executive table or speak up in a meeting where you've never done it before. You're doing something different and people are noticing that. But if you don't do it consistently, that could just be a one-off. Oh, Sue had a question today. Interesting that she did. She never speaks. But now today she did. So you have to be consistent with it. But what's fascinating to me and what I tell people and prepare them for is that you're going to feel different. Your confidence is going to grow. And then other people are going to start paying attention to that and realize that something's different. They won't even be able to put their finger on it yet, but they'll ask your opinion. They'll invite you to meetings that they never invite you to. They'll start including you in things because they're now seeing the value that you're bringing where you probably weren't showing it before. So that's why visibility and talking about your value and impact is so important. And this process of Rise really just helps you have a bit of a structure to follow to be able to do that with.
Mm. So as a framework, I see the way to combat imposter, the way to maybe if you're an introvert, a way to achieve some things that get you towards this word visibility. Let's unpack that word. What does that mean? What is visibility and why is it important?
I mean, to me, visibility is important because you have so much value and talent, but you're hiding it. You're sitting in the background, right? In my story, I got feedback that I was sitting in the back of the room. I wasn't participating in meetings. I wasn't adding value. And moments before I get that feedback, I'm a top talent. I'm doing all the right things. So I had no idea that I had become complacent and I wasn't doing the things that I needed to do to get not necessarily recognition, but to just have my voice out there. And
Mm.
what was really hard for me to, just sit with for a minute after I heard that feedback is I'm not only hiding myself, but I'm hiding my team. I'm hiding our work. I'm hiding all the good things. And I just, I was so focused on trying to stay out of the spotlight that it was hurting so much. And we all know in companies whose teams are hidden away and no one knows what you do, well, that's the first group to go. So you never want to not be talking about the value that you're providing. And to me, that is how you get recognition, how you get opportunities, how you get promotions, but also how you get included in things that maybe you never even thought you could be before. And hiding feels safer because it is, but it also keeps you from opportunities.
Mm. I have, and I was in IT, IT sales. We sold to IT departments for 20 something years. And there was always the phenomenon of the group that performed the best, that had the best, that was just empirically the best. But if they weren't conveying that out, they would often get beat out by whoever presented the
Yes.
best. And I think that's part of what you're talking about is the proficient ones. And here's a paradox. I've watched very proficient teams, and I think there's something baked into this that they're very good at what they do, and so they're not very good at that visibility part. At explain that piece up, get in, get the job done, spend all your time, focus, and attention on completing and doing just an impeccable job, but zero marketing skills, let's call it internally. And so they, the loud and there's a Michael Scott reference in here somewhere. The loud and incapable, incompetent ones seem to get their thing. So I love what you're doing to really empower a better result for everybody, because this is something that, if you're making your choices or just naturally gravitating towards people that better market themselves with poorer results, then it's a worse outcome for everyone.
Right.
So don't hide your light under a bushel, I think is the is the thing there. That's what we need to make sure does not happen.
Agree.
So the framework that you use for imposter syndrome and the different maybe we'll call them archetypes or types, the six, I find that fascinating, and I find it also so full of utility. There's ways to understand ourselves so much better with those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to unpack all of them. Let's just kind of maybe grab a couple. The agreeable accommodator was one that really just stuck out for me. And then the criticism avoider.
Mm-hmm.
But really in all of those types, let's say we identify them all. What are some steps that listeners can identify which type are them? I mean, if it doesn't happen naturally and go, aha, that's that moment, what's some of the first steps in understanding it in such a way that they might shift that pattern?
Yeah, I mean, I think for agreeable accommodator, right, those are people who never say no, right? If your boss comes and says, I need you to do this project and you have 10 more, and you probably should say no, but they don't because they want to people please. They want everybody to like them. They want to be the person that's seen as, saving the day, right? The person who everybody comes to. And I think that feeds something inside of them to feel good. But what if instead of just taking on more and more and getting overloaded, you ask a few questions, which is, how urgent is this request? Is this, and then you have to weigh out for yourself, is this more important than the work I'm doing already? And you get to have a voice. And that's the part I think for me, for a long time, I was this person who, oh, sure, I'll keep taking more and more on and working a million hours. And eventually it catches up with you because you can't really do it all, even though you think you can. And so that is where I want to give people a voice to just slow down long enough to say, is this a good thing for me? Because we matter, but we put everybody else in front of us and say that they matter more. And that's what a people pleaser does all the time in their families, with their friends, with work. It happens all across their life. And so pretty soon it's just a habit that they have been doing for so long that they don't even think about it. So I'm just asking people to slow down and ask a few questions before they just say yes to anything. And that might be someone asking you to go to dinner that you don't really want to go to, but you feel bad if you don't say yes. I want you to have some things prepared that says, I've got plans tonight, but maybe another time. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to explain. But we have this need to be liked so much that it gets in the way. And for that one specifically, as a leader of people, or as you get more responsibility, you need to be able to challenge. You need to be respected more than liked. And so that agreeable accommodator, it becomes a bigger challenge for you as you progress, but it can also hurt you if you're not standing up for your team or standing up for yourself for the work that you're doing. If you're just saying yes to everyone because you're worried about being liked, that can get in the way. So that's what I've learned for myself and for clients for that one specifically. And we can go to any of the others that you want to talk about. But that is one that I think is really hard for people to let go of because they've been doing it for years and years. You know, they people pleased with their parents, with their teachers to get good grades, to get approval. And that becomes something that you seek out, like through external validation and other ways. And I want people to have internal validation where they trust themselves, they know that they're doing the right thing, and that they get to say no if it makes sense for them.
Mm. That validation, what a difficult word sometimes. One thing that I think for some of the things I've been working on for myself, I hit a point where when I get to validation, there's this part to where I want to root it out, like stop needing that. And I realize I might as well just tell myself, stop breathing. And I feel like any system that sets me up that is completely contrary to my reality, my truth, my being, myself, that system probably is going to fail over time. It's not there to serve me. And so with validation, and really this is, I think, what I'm finding with almost everything is the function isn't necessarily the bad part. The need for validation as a dynamic, as an individual, we're social creatures. It's just kind of a natural thing. It's definitely more amplified for us with some of the self-doubt issues. But I feel like it's more, what sets me up for success is just having balance. Do it in a healthy way. It's okay to need validation, but is it healthy or is it unhealthy? And once I kind of found that balance, that has been one of the most useful lenses that I've used when I see, like, do you need this too much? Are you being thirsty? Like, it's, but I do believe there is a healthy way to seek and need validation. Everybody likes gold stars.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think a lot of people grow up with that, right? We want to get the A, we want to get the, yeah. I mean, I want to add to that a little bit because I think for me anyway, what helped me was recognizing that I was needing their validation too much and making that how I saw myself, right? So if someone says, you got a high rating, well, then I must be doing a good job. But what was interesting to me is even though I got the high rating, it still wasn't enough for me. So there was still something more that I felt like I needed. And when I started to really say, you know what, I trust myself, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to come from that position instead, especially in the world of, having your own business. There's no one really to validate me anymore. I mean, I'm a great boss to myself. So, of course, I'm giving myself gold stars. But I think it's really interesting when you are in different environments, you may not have someone to validate you. And so when you can validate yourself, it just means that you can operate in a whole new way. You're free from comparison. You don't worry about what other people are doing. And that's the part about visibility that's interesting to me, is helping people recognize that they all have something unique. And how can we celebrate that and embrace it instead of trying to minimize it and devalue it, which I think is what a lot of people do. If you're really good at something, it comes easy to you. You don't think it's a big deal. But to other people, when they say, "Oh my gosh, Johnny, you're so good at that," we tend to, "Oh, it's no big deal. Yeah, that I've been doing that for years. Nothing big." But if someone else can't do it, it is something that's unique for you and that you should celebrate. And the more we can do that, we don't really need to have validation from other people as much, because we know what's really special about us and that we can celebrate that.
I don't know that it's an exact analogy, but one of our very first guests, Chris Kelso, he's the guy that introduced me to imposter syndrome and has written a book, Overcoming the Imposter. TED Talks is really focused now on lots of different components of leadership and doubt. But I think even in his TED Talk, he really talks about the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy. And this has been a recurring kind of theme that we trot out and unpack and play with a little bit with our following guests. And I think what you were describing, there's a piece of that in there that, the self-esteem it could be subconscious level trauma, hidden as feelings, all these things that with self-esteem, and he uses the term fickle. I like that term. I think that's useful. It can be fickle. It can be wrong. It can deny fact. But when it gets over into the self-efficacy side of it, it's more, despite us being, self-doubt and the having the self-esteem issues, when you get into this self-efficacy, and I think that's part of what you're talking about, you can really put it into a results-oriented, and maybe that's a way that we can appreciate our accomplishments in a more pure way by simply putting in that, can I do the job? Yes. There it is. The accomplishment's done. I can go look at my resume and go, wow, I did all that. Like, wow, that's self-efficacy. And maybe it can get us to something that is a weird phenomenon. And that's, if I know it, if it's in my brain, it can't be all that useful, can it? And that is such a fallacy. And I think such a dynamic of the imposter.
Yeah, I mean, those are just stories we've told ourselves along the way to keep ourselves in a good place. Or so in the new workbook, I call them base files. So beliefs, assumptions, stories, and experiences. And those are files that we're holding on to from maybe long ago, situations that happened to us way back when. And whenever something happens, we pull up one of those files, no different than in a computer. And that story that we have and have been holding on to may still be valid. It may be totally wrong now, but because we don't have a new story to put in place, we only see the old story, and that's what we operate from. So slowing down to say, is this story valid or not? Is this still a situation that, I've grown and developed? Is that still a situation for me that I believe? And that's, reflection. That's slowing down, that a lot of people, we're so busy. We don't have time for that. I don't have time to think about that stuff, Sue. But when you do that, you can actually make better decisions and realize that you've grown from that person who originally had that story. But that's the part that I think we are all operating from this lens of all of these old files that we may not know are corrupt and old, and we need to get rid of. And we need to replace them with something new, something that we believe now. And to me, when I'm working with someone, I need them to start to see what their future looks like now, not wait for 6 months or a year. And so we'll do some some frameworks and some things that help them really start to see what's possible. And when they can see what's possible, they can start being that person today, which changes those files in their head. And they don't have to hold on to those old things that are keeping them small and hidden away anymore. They can start to really shine.
Mm. I'm going to pay you some compliments because the framework, that word has been in several roles that I'm playing right now, things that I'm doing from both a professional and a community involvement and just a personal level. I keep going back to the word framework. I say it 20 times a week. And I think as I've gone through and had these conversations, with some of my other guests and like I'm having with you, framework keeps coming up as maybe the two most powerful tools that I've been able to use for myself personally that I see in everyone's work is have a good framework and have great analogies. And almost everyone that has any form of platform that is related to this type of work, they share two things in common, and it is a really great framework. And I think it allows us to envision it. We can see it in our heads. We can use those frameworks. I've got RISE, so now I know what that means. It's an acronym, so now I can use it, and it's good for memory. I mean, it's just some of the basic tactical things around how we use these frameworks are so powerful. But the analogy of the file, I love that analogy. I can pull a file out, open it up, take whatever's in it, throw it away, put something new in there. We've talked a lot about stories and some of the rich imagery and as an analogy, how useful that can be. I think your IT background probably informed that file piece of it, but what a rich and useful analogy to help us envision the thing that we're combating, fighting, trying to change, trying to morph. And there's something about that visibility in our mind to look at either through a framework or as an analogy to understand a thing, and then set to work on changing or impacting or making different or bettering. And I love the files. I love the file concept because there is so many ways that I can put that into actual use in my brain to understand things.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole new take on storytelling that we've talked a lot about it, but we probably talked chapters, and we've talked about characters, and we've talked about narratives, but the file component, you've got an operating system at play in some ways.
Yeah. And you can have them about other people. So, I tell a story in the workbook about somebody who didn't, in this person's voice, right? They weren't treated well by this other person, and they run into them in the cafeteria, and their immediate reaction is they're pulling up the old file of he's a jerk. He treated me bad, right? And so they're immediately trying to avoid that person, and this person is walking towards them now. So they put their arms up, like this to kind of combat and put some armor up for themselves about what's going to happen, knowing that that's the experience they had before. And this person comes up and says, I wanted to apologize to you. I went through coaching. I had an understanding that I wasn't treating people well, and I wasn't treating you well. And I am so sorry. I'd like to buy you lunch and repair our relationship. That is a new file now that person has in place and got rid of the old file. So what's interesting is it's about ourselves, but it's also about other people. And when we're communicating, we're pulling up files all the time. We don't realize it. And immediately saying, oh, she doesn't really measure up. She's not good enough for this role. I don't think she's ready. We have to ask, are those old files? Or have they done something in the last 3 years that I don't know about and I need to understand? So to me, there's a lot of pieces to this about not only your own files and what you think about yourself, but what are the files you have of other people? And are those old and corrupt as well? And just slowing down to ask that question.
It was a thing we did just recently where someone asked us to tell us something about yourself that might surprise us. And this was a team that had known each other for a long time. And it's funny how our preconceived notions and our, inner workings, we create these stories. And I've found that one question on a team. Tell me something about you that would surprise me. There's something about that surprise. Almost always, whatever the answer is, the file completely gets disrupted of whatever I might know about you. So for anyone on a team, I highly recommend that.
Love that.
Somewhere along the line, ask that question, and we'll do some updates on the file and changing that out.
And it brings people closer together, right? Because now they know something that, they haven't really shared before. I think that's right. That's really great.
Well, there was one that someone said soccer, and there were two people that I'm not sure that they were completely connected on a ton of levels. But the second soccer came out, it was like they, started talking like fax machines to one another. And it's a great little tool. So hopefully those listening can take that out. I want to go back, and I'm going to reread the 6 distinct types, and then I'm going to grab onto one that actually I think scared me, and so I avoided it. So I picked out a couple of them. So there's the agreeable accommodator, the just can't say no, the image judger, the diminished and devalued, the delayer and avoider, and the criticism avoider. So those are the six ones. When I got to diminished and valued, the one who plays small, I don't know what the reaction was, but it was a negative one. It was something that almost maybe a little visceral. And there's a lot of, one who plays small. That seems fraught with significance. Let's talk just a little bit about that one and how that manifests in people.
I'll use my own example first, but for me, it was trying to avoid the spotlight. And so that would mean I would use language that would demonstrate that I'm not confident, that I really don't know enough to be able to do things, even though I did, right? But my language would have said I didn't. And what I found is, and this is why the workbook is becoming such a big deal right now for me, is language means so much to how people interpret your credibility, your confidence, your confidence. All of those things come through language. So, we talked about earlier, if you're good at something and you say, it's no big deal. It's not a big deal for me to do that. It's really easy for me. Instead of saying, you know what, you're right, I'm really great at that. Thanks for sharing that compliment with me. It's a different response. But when it really hit home for me was we had put a really big IT project in globally, took, probably a couple of years to get this in. And my director came up to me at the time and said, hey, this, how are things going? Blah, blah, blah. And I remember literally saying, it's no big deal. We did our best. We're really happy with the results, but I literally was not celebrating, not only for myself, but for my team, the amazing amount of hours and time and effort that we put in to make this a success. And so that started to really hit home for me. And I had a coach who was brilliant at the time. And she said, Sue, if you're not valuing yourself, how can other people value you? And that starts with how we think about ourselves, but it's also that impacts your language, your behaviors, your actions, right? Nothing happens without you thinking about it first. So all of those things, I needed to change how I saw myself first, which then in turn changed my language. And so I have really recognized more and more the empower words we use about ourselves, the things that we say that really demonstrate that we have value, that we know what we're doing, that we have a lot of talents and capabilities and influence that we can use. But getting in front of people and using that language intentionally becomes really important, because I would probably say many times I used to just wing it and didn't have a plan, and I would just say whatever came out of my mouth. But that isn't going to serve you in the long run. So in the workbook, I have scripts, I have templates, I have examples from clients so that people can start to see how they said something one way and then how we changed it to be more valued and impactful for an organization to hear, or someone in your leadership to hear. So one more quick example for you, and then I'll stop. So think about a one-on-one. People go into one-on-ones and they give a grocery list of things that they've done. I did this, I did this, I did this. Instead of saying, I did this and here's what happened, or I did this and here's what I learned, or I met with the clients and got agreement on something that I never thought that they would agree with us on. And now we're able to move forward. So it has to be something that you're doing that's valuable and impactful to the company, to the business. And I think we're taking for granted all of those things that we're doing because we're good at it, or we don't feel like we need to share it with anybody. They're too busy. They don't need to hear from us. Yes, they do. If what you're doing is important and you care about it, talk about it. But that is not what's happening. I give examples of an interview. If you're going into an interview, you would find a million things that you would say that set you apart from other people. But in everyday life at work, we just do our job. We don't spend time telling anybody the great things that we're doing. So start with your boss in one-on-ones or with other influencers that you're having one-on-ones with. Start sharing the things that you're doing or that your team is doing so that people can see you, maybe for the first time because you haven't shown them what you can do. And that's how they think about you then for future opportunities.
There's two quotes that come to mind. There's one, and I don't have either of them completely committed to memory, but there's one that I think it says something along the lines of being humble isn't thinking less about yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. And I like that phrase and that change because I do see where humility can jump the rails, and sometimes it's almost as challenging and difficult as arrogance and the braggart side. I've seen false humility come in, especially from leaders that could impact their entire team by them being humble about some accomplishment, and there's an entire team going, wow, that we wanted more than what you just said, like, oh shucks,
Right.
that doesn't work. And then the other quote, and it was a military leader, I can't remember, general somebody, maybe an admiral, but the quote was basically just, humble is really just allowing the ideas of others to exist in the room.
Oh, I love
And I thought I thought it was such a great one because it's don't diminish yours, don't weaken yours. And it's important that we have that strength and we know how to navigate. If you're 6'4" and you can dunk the ball and you say that, that is not, not being humble. It's just a statement of fact. If it's a great accomplishment and you can show the impact, celebrating our successes, but it's so difficult in communicating with others and, balancing that where we don't come across, because that also might be something where what we're saying could be factually correct and we're doing it in a way where it's without emotion and we're just saying we're 6'4" and we dunked the ball this quarter. People can still react to that in their strange and negative ways. But that, I do think that ability to avoid the either the false humility or just the self-limiting tendencies that we have in conveying our results, our impact. There was one little tool, this is a small thing, but it was one little tool that someone shared with me. If you're if you're busy and you're trying to get people scheduled and there's a gap of time, I see this a lot. Sorry, this took me so long to explain. And someone said, stop doing that. They said, instead, just say, appreciate your patience.
Mm-hmm.
It positions you in a completely different sort of dynamic. It doesn't, you don't come in the door groveling, sorry, it took me so long. Apologetic. It's just, it's such a positioning of strength. And in my sales days, we had a leader that always was trying to root out weasel words, is what he called it. And that was another one where it was, sort of maybe got, I guess that maybe like there's all these things that are weasel words that I think we use just almost as a defense mechanism when we're making statements. We almost have to put that limitation describer on the front end of whatever we're about to say. I guess we did a good job. Well, no, just say you did a good job.
Yeah, because otherwise it changes the way people see you, right? You're not as confident. So, I think a lot of times people who are more junior in an organization might start doing that because they don't feel like they measure up yet compared to other people on the table. Or women might do this too, where they use the words just, maybe, I think. It just changes the way people perceive you, and it changes the way they take the information that you're giving in a way that's not helpful, right? So you can say, I think maybe we could do this, but I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check, versus this is what we need to do. I've already done the research. I've already worked with my team, and this is the direction we need to go, right? It's a whole different level of confidence coming through, right? And it's so important. And when you're trying to think about your personal brand, that is one way to do it. So sometimes I'll have people record yourself on your phone while you're in meetings and then listen back to what you say, because we just do things unconsciously and don't realize it. Or if you video or record meetings or presentations, I would do that for some of my clients. I'll say, watch my presentation. Tell me what I did. Tell me what I should shift and change. And many times there's not a lot, but it could be language. And that is something that's easy to do and change and has a big impact at the end of the day as to how people see you.
That's amazing. I think I told you I had 10 questions. Maybe we got 2 in there. I think I'm going to, the rich tapestry, that's what came to my head, the rich tapestry of the 6 distinct types. I feel like we could spend hours just knowing on each and every single one of those things, and the way that the framework and the analogy component that's in there that allows us to see that in ourselves, and then really put to work that framework of RISE, where we're going to reflect, we're going to ideate, we're going to select, we're going to evaluate. We have spent a lot of time focused on just that area, and I feel like we could spend hours more. But we are getting close to the top of the hour. So what I want to do is give you the opportunity. Please tell us. I believe you have a book that has recently hit. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm excited about this. This is kind of like the next level of visibility, if you think of it that way. The visibility factor was intended to give people an understanding of visibility and give them a framework to follow and rise and start to have the conversation about where things can go for them. This workbook is called Your Journey to Visibility, and I called it Journey for a reason, because we go through their career. We look at where they've been, where they are now, where they want to go. And then we spend a little time understanding their personal brand, their confidence and their value, some of the concepts from the visibility factor. But throughout each of these different sections, there are reflection things. There are things for them to start to assess themselves on and really spend time understanding where they are. So it gave me a lot of freedom to create frameworks, which I loved. And I wanted it to be fun. So there's some fun stories in there. And then the last section is about assessing themselves on the 3 largest types of challenges that I feel like visibility really has an impact on for people. And so they do their own self-assessment, and then they go through solution paths for each one of those. And they can pick and choose which things they want to use. But I walk them through client examples of where a client had these challenges and the different tools we used, or the different ways of reframing things, or the different templates I used with them, so that they can start to see what that did for that person and how they can start to use it for themselves and modify it accordingly. But the intent is for everybody to start to see that this is easier than they thought, and that they can start doing it today, and they can pick and choose what they need. And maybe they, put it aside for a while after they're done, and then they have a new situation that comes up. So I want it to be a guide that they can continue to refer to. And I just want to share one other thing regarding the different types. I have a podcast episode. The podcast is called The Visibility Factor, but there's a podcast episode for each one of the types because there was so much to talk about. I agree with you. I had one that was kind of an overview, and I thought, I think I have to break them out into types, an episode for each one. So there's an episode for each one of those that I go into more detail on because I think it's really important to understand, if one of those impacts you more than others, how to really move through it and deal with it.
Well, we're going to, in our episode notes, we'll drop the link to the podcast. We'll drop a link to where you can find the book, The Visibility Factor. I want to say thank you for this really incredible journey into the way you see this problem, and it is such a unique framework and outlook, and I've just enjoyed rolling around in it and learning more about it. I look forward to learning more. I'll be getting your book today also.
Thank you.
And finding Visibility Factor wherever you might find your favorite podcasts. But Susan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and all of the unique things that you've navigated. I had so many questions that we didn't get to, but I enjoyed this conversation so much. I hope our listeners have found it really incredibly valuable and something that they can grab onto through your podcast, through your book, through following you. We'll drop your website down in the comments as well. But Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. I've truly enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. I loved it too. I know we went to different places, but that's sometimes the beauty of this, right? You never know where you're going to go, and whatever comes out is what's supposed to come out. So that's great.
There was just so much value in those couple few things that we could have spent the entire day in them. So that was where we were exactly where we needed to be.
Exactly.
And I enjoyed it thoroughly. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing more from you in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you again to Susan M. Barber for joining us today on the Impodsters. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm looking forward to tucking into her book, The Visibility Factor. You should get yourself a copy too. Coming up on our next episode, we'll have Kim Menninger. She's a certified leadership coach. She's a TEDx speaker, and she's host of the Imposter Syndrome Files podcast. We're really looking forward to this one, and we'll hope you join us.